Joint meeting of Smithfield Town Council and the Halliwell Review Committee, February 3rd, 2022. Should we just, Jeff, you want to, okay, I'm sorry, Madam Clerk, roll call, please. We're gonna do that, a little out of order so they can do their thing. She's late, she's on the way, she's stuck in traffic. Here. Here. Here.
Halliwell Review Committee for February 3rd, 2022. Mr. Sabini.
Here.
Mrs. ADJOURN.
Here.
Mr. Mayor.
Here.
Mr. Durkin.
Here.
And
Joe, want me to lead us in the prayer and pledge, please?
Lord, the Holy Spirit of counsel, always serving the positions of authority and responsibility.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with justice for all.
Discussion by council vote on the action on the Halliwell Review Committee. At this time, I hand the floor with Mr. Porter.
thank you very much, Mr. President. Again, tonight we are having a joint meeting with you folks just to kind of present to you what our recommendations are as we move forward with the Halliwell property. There are two letters that have been distributed to you all. The first one being dated the 23rd of December of last year, and then a more recent one of January 27th of this year. Based on our conversations at the January 5th town council meeting. So everything is pretty well outlined there as we stand, but I did just want to take a moment to identify some of the recommendations that the committee has made thus far and bring everybody up to speed using some quick presentation just to kind of illustrate some more of our key points of what we'd like to illustrate. Screen share, and then that will be up on the screen. So Carol, I'll make the trade with you. Anyway, so it's a little difficult to see on this screen. Maybe Carl, if you could minimize the attendees on the so you can see as well. I tried to up the contrast on the presentation so that see a little better. Yeah. Okay. So back in mid-December, we had our presentation with Weston and Sampson. They had brought forth 5 various concepts for their land use study. Again, we reviewed them as very high-level conceptual plans, and what we wanted the committee has recommended that we look at continuing and exploring further concept plan number 5, which basically includes one single building. What that looks like is yet to be determined. But we were thinking that with all of the utilities, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, vertical circulation, such as elevators, it really would be a lot more cost effective to utilize one footprint as opposed to multiple footprints. We understand that there was a certain nostalgia with the Halliwell campus, it being kind of open and multiple buildings, you were able to kind of go from place to place. But we also felt that that could very easily be replicated with some of the architectural elements that would further be developed in the future. We also identified quite a few exterior or outside recreation areas. We were looking at adding some basketball courts, tennis courts, a potential splash pad, playground, and then boardwalk and pathways pretty much throughout the entirety of the property. So that's kind of where Weston Sampson land study ended. So as we progress, again, this just kind of shows, again, and you working with this projector, the contrast is not very good. So again, this yellow circle identifies the splash pad. These yellow rectangles are more exterior courts, tennis or basketball. And then this red outline would be that singular building here. And then there was a lot of discussion of wetlands. This entire blue area is the wetlands, and it includes the new DEM buffers, which requires anywhere from a 50-foot setback to a 100-foot setback. So you can really start to see now that our area for buildable land really becomes the southeastern portion of the property. So basically within here. And then the other part that we have to contend with are steep slopes. So we have, a fairly steep slope up in the northwest corner. We have some not as steep slopes, but we do have steep slopes down in the southeast corner. So again, where it's been built out is really the most logical place to put what we're going to recommend to be a community center. As we kind of continue further a little bit, I know the question, and just to kind of give some perspective of actual buildings that we have in town. We have the elementary school up here in yellow, minus the newest addition to the fourth grade building here, classrooms rather. We have the high school, we have the middle school. In the middle here, we have the library, we have the Primrose Fire Station, and then we have the current police station that sits on Smithfield Avenue. Now, I know the question has been asked, what can we put down on this property in addition to a community center? So I just wanted to kind of outline that, we can fit quite a bit down there between, this is this half portion here, that's the middle school. This is the footprint of the elementary schools that go into the steeper slopes. The library can fit in there, the Primrose Fire Station, the police station can all fit in there. So that just we wanted to provide a sense of scale and understanding of, the size of the buildings that we have in town could potentially become, or similar scale buildings can be placed down in that property. We've also been asked, is it appropriate for the police station to be down there? And based on hearing the last joint meeting with the NBRTF, the Tecton architects, them stating that, the police station down in this low-lying area isn't really an appropriate site for the police station. We have heard concerns about providing space for a new school. Even if we create a community center that's, about the footprint of the library, whether it be a 2 or 3 story building, we still have more than enough land to essentially provide space for a new school. And I wouldn't recommend that we would do a 1 story elementary school like we have now. We could certainly fit another 2 story or 3 story building such as the middle school in that area. So it's not out of the question. So that's kind of where we ended up with concept number 5. We really want to recommend that we want to continue to further explore it through the RFQ process with an architect and an engineer, because right now we're now at the part where we ended with our land use study, and now we're going into our master planning phase. And then the next item that was requested at the January 5th town council meeting was, what would we like to see down there? So really, we can spend quite a bit of time building a consensus amongst the community through the survey that we did in May and June of last year. And then we also had the mini charrette, which we had about 40 to 50 people attending. And in that process, we got a very loud and clear voice from the senior residents saying that they'd like to see a senior center. And in addition to that 41%, another 29% said that they would like to see a community center or multi-generational space. So in kind of, and then as that little footnote down at the 18%, they implied an age inclusive usage of the property. So, you know, more than 75% of the town really wants to be able to have some community based use down there. And then in the report that we provided to you through Weston and Sampson, there were quite a few other activities and topics and ideas that folks wanted to be seeing down at the Halliwell property, such as the outdoor activities, recreation, again, senior facility, kids activities and spaces, or an intergenerational or multi-generational space, veteran space, community gardens, and multifunction and rentable spaces. Those were all the consensus that we're all of the opinion that really this is what's driving. These are the two main things that are really driving what we're going to be recommending, is that overall, we're recommending that the property be utilized for a multi-community use facility with the potential of dedicated spaces which do require further exploration. So again, this is just that concept 5 again, but really highlighting that the southeast corner here is really the potential buildable area. Understanding that there are some steeper slopes in this corner, but you know, we can certainly work with that slope and have use that to our advantage as opposed to just doing the cut and fill and everything. So like I said in our letter, I don't want to read it word for word because I did that at the last council meeting, but you know, we've really come to the end of our, what we feel is our charge at this point, and are looking to the council to have some action items tonight so that we can continue to move forward. One of those things, you know, basically our biggest thing are these new charges that we're recommending get added to our resolution, which are oversight and execution of an architectural and RFQ contract, which would include that master planning and master design process, exploration of viability of wetlands areas for recreation purposes. So I've already started discussions with our town planner, Mark Carullo, in trying to identify what passive recreation or active recreation DEM would allow. So we would be reaching out to them to get an idea of what they would let us do and what they wouldn't let us do. That many times they're very accommodating as long as we're maintaining some of the bulk of the wetlands and not disturbing them. The next one would be investigating funding opportunities and work with appropriate town entities to explore financial considerations. Again, at the last council meeting on the 5th, I know Councilwoman Alves was mentioning that we start looking at grants, and we've spoken with Bobby Moynihan, the assistant town planner, and she's already been keeping her ears and eyes open for one grants that we might be able to pursue. The thing about some of these grants, such as like the chaplain grant, there's kind of two things. They like to see a plan in place, and that's where the master plan would be coming into play. And they would also like to see that we have some skin in the game, so they're not just going to hand over money. We have to show that, you know, we're going to contribute a percentage and they'll contribute a percentage, but they also like to see a plan put in place. And then the last two are exploring partnerships with community organizations. I know we've had a presentation with the YMCA previously, and discussions with them. That might be a potential avenue to partner with and learn and understand what they know. And they were very enthusiastic about helping us really begin to understand what the community of North Smithfield would like to see as a YMCA type building. And then, again, we can explore and continue to evaluate potential community uses of the property, but I think our main focus again will still be community-based building, whether it be, phased or lit, or, we're gonna, pick things off as we go, but we still need to create that master plan. And then again, the second letter that we sent was just this presentation of the committee wholeheartedly recommending that there's further exploration of concept number 5. And as I said earlier, that we recommend that the Halliwell property be utilized as a community-based property. So that's what I got for tonight.
Yeah, can you explain how the YMCA works? The YMCA is not gonna come in and build this building, right?
No, they're not. This would be more of an instance where it would, the way that they had explained their partnership is that they would come in, they would assist us in determining the needs of the town. So if we found that we had an overwhelming need for a community pool, as an example, I'm not saying that it's going to be a thing. They would help us identify these needs, and then that would inform us on how we shape our building. So we could find that, people would like to see another example would be a clay modeling studio, a 3D printing studio, a maker space, an art, an art room, for photography, the workout room, or, just a simple multi-purpose space that is similar to a space like this, but has, 8 or 10 floor outlets, is wired to have a bunch of Wi-Fi so that they could teach a computer class. Or I know some libraries that I've been working with are doing cell phones for seniors, where they give classes on how to use, iPhones and everything. So it's really, they would come in and help with that surveying of the community to help us narrow in a little bit more on what we could be expecting to put into a building.
So they don't really pony up any money.
Not right off the bat, no. They, from what I understood, and my committee members can correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I understood is that we would build the building, and we essentially would rent the building out to them so that they could run the whole facility. And then there could be areas of the facility that are specifically for town uses, and they could maintain, who's going to be using that room on what day and such. So if Mrs. Tebow had a class for her aging well, those folks could come in, and there would be, it wouldn't be associated with the Y, but they would just be overseeing the management portion of it.
So we build it, and then we rent it back to the Y. That's interesting.
Am I wrong in saying that?
No, we really resolve how we work. And I know of that, our meeting with them, as I discussed it with them, they want to get together with us and work on a plan. And I don't think we get the details of it. I don't.
Yeah, I know when they were meeting with us, they did say, we will work with the town to come up with an agreement that's mutually beneficial to both parties. So if we, obviously we have Mr. Agliosi that would go through agreements, they have their lawyers that would go through agreements, but I think we could, figure out, where we start and end, and then where they start and end.
Did they seem interested?
Yes, they did.
They would more or less come in and set up and run certain programs that they have already established in other places. They would come in and run them. in our building, basically, that's what they would be doing. They would be running classes for,
I think the thing that I like best about this, they want to sit with us and the community and decide what programs we want. And then they'll provide the program in those areas. That's what I want best about the conversation we have. If they want to work with us, to decide what's good. They're not gonna put a massive gym in it, we say, we don't want to use that. They're not gonna put a pool in it, there's no one just having a pool. They're gonna work with us to see what programs the community, they wanna work with the community. It's a I was very positively impressed by their act.
The other note is that it appeared through the initial meeting that they would be willing, or part of their contribution would be to take over the administrative responsibilities of the structure. In addition to our programs, any town programs, running those programs as well. Everything we're saying is preliminary, but they certainly looked upon it as a joint effort. And I don't believe for a moment that monetary contribution was ruled out by any stretch. The only fine point was ownership of the structure and all of that, which is again, 25 meetings later, we can get to that. But there appeared to be a solid enough ground for most members of our committee to justify further meetings, to get to the point where we can flush out some of these questions that then can be answered either to the affirmative or the negative.
Because that's a game changer. I mean, if they're willing to, if we take out the note, the bond, not kidding, we take out the bond and rent it back, and they're paying back, technically, they're paying back the bond. That's a lot different than us having to come up with the money ourselves to pay back that bond. So that could move things forward a lot quicker, if that is the case.
I wouldn't jump to that. Coach.
I'm gonna go with that, though.
No, John, it's a great idea, and that's what we thought also. But
I think one of the, so when we did meet with them, it did feel as though the conversation was very fluid, right? So we came up with a lot of suggestions, and a lot of their responses, quite often was, well, we can work with you on that. So it was a very fluid conversation. Not completely committed. No, I mean, obviously, no. I mean, it was just an open conversation, but one of the things that did was a point of interest for me was I asked them, obviously they're in the business of either managing or building YMCA's. Do they have access to grants that they are aware of? And that was one of the things that they said that they do have access to. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they will only allow us, they'll only have access to those grants if they personally finance it. But the takeaway that I got, which we could certainly get more clarity on that, is that they might have access to grants that could help us with the situation.
Tony, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's important that we recognize that it's very much collaborative, right? And it's also tailor-made. It's not like we're talking about something that they're not already doing somewhere else. So there's a lot of examples. We do a lot of research around what kind of arrangements they have with other communities and use that as a template or build around that anyway to help whatever direction we want to go in. So it's very much something that they're willing to discuss with us and tailor-make to what we might want here and now.
They gave us examples of numerous joint ventures they've done. So this is not a first. They've done something.
And one of the other things that I'd also like to point out, that what our committee has been also looking at is really making this become a destination, not only for our community, but other communities. Being able to provide something that's new and different that will not only just benefit North Smithfield, but also look to benefit more of Northern Rhode Island. So then that way it becomes more of a really centerpiece for our town, that we can say, hey, look, we have something that other towns don't, and we're providing, and we're certainly inviting other folks to come in as well.
Mr. Zelinski?
Thank you, Mr. President. I attended that meeting, and
I can't recall, was the subject of reduced rates at the YMCA, was that part of, for residents would have a reduced, Smithfield residents would receive a reduced rate? There was, and what was the answer?
I don't know if it was the definitive answer, but that was something that was brought up in the conversation. Something we could discuss.
Yeah, thank you.
So is this, the direction that we should go?
I mean, I think at this point, when we had made our initial recommendations of exploring collaboration with various other community groups, I wouldn't narrow it down just to the YMCA quite yet. I think I would still leave the door open if there's situations where the Boys and Girls Club, for example, might be an option. But I certainly think that we would want to make sure that we're not shutting anybody out, because then there might be opportunities that we don't know about quite yet. So I think we can, like I said, we recommended community-based organizations as kind of a wide net, just in case there's something that hasn't come to our attention quite yet. It's not to say that we wouldn't continue talking with the folks at the YMCA, that wouldn't be the case. It would just make sure that we're really doing our due diligence and exploring all the potential opportunities that we have out there.
Yeah,
Right?
Rick Pendergast, Director of Public Works. Sounds fantastic. You can go whatever plan you want to, but I must be missing the initial conversation. And I can stand here and be corrected. What are we doing with the present buildings, demolition, and the cost associated with all of that? We can sit here and say we want to build Gillette Stadium turn. It's not happening until we remove the buildings the correct way and put the money on the table, which is millions of dollars. I must have missed that memo because this all sounds wonderful. The committee's done a great job. But as the Director of Public Works in charge of that facility right now, I think we're missing the initial scope of this project. And I know that when I'm doing my reports all day this week for budgets and capital, I haven't been told to put any money into capital for the Halliwell project. So I just need a little guidance. If the council's going to move forward and tell this committee that this sounds wonderful and we're going to move forward, what are we doing with the present complex as it stands?
So, Mr. Pendergast, to answer your question, the first item that we recommend in our first letter is to abate and demolish the buildings. Simple as that. As far as money goes, and people can correct me if I'm incorrect, but part of the bond that was voted upon set aside $400,000 for the abatement and demolition for the decommissioning of the school. So there is an item that's already been set aside, $400,000 to take care of this, to take care of the property.
Which, Jeff, in due respect, you do know that that doesn't even hit one building.
I would say, yeah.
We have 13 buildings now.
When the bond was initially passed, and that 400,000 was set aside, that was back in 2014, 2016. So yeah, I understand that probably it won't cover everything, but it will cover a good chunk of it. I mean, I've been looking at cost estimates the past 2 or 3 weeks for various projects in my office, and the demolition numbers are, the abatement's going to be the big number.
Right.
And we're supposed to be getting that number from the ECM consultants that are going to be doing their abatement testing tomorrow. Is it tomorrow and Friday?
Monday and Tuesday.
Monday and Tuesday.
They're gonna do it.
So they'll be providing that cost estimate for us on how much it's going to cost to abate everything. And then once that we have that number, we put that out to bid for a contractor to do so, then, we can have a good idea of the money that's left.
And that's what I'm trying to put forward tonight, John. Let's not jump to the fast lane before we get to the breakdown.
Mhm.
We need to see what those numbers are. And for my budget, if I'm gonna be the person responsible for putting this money in a capital account, or however we're gonna do this, I can tell you that $400,000 is gonna help, but it's not going to demolish that whole complex. So I love the concept. I love what we're trying to do. I just don't want to lose sight of what we already have and what we have to take care of before we get to that. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
It's kind of sort of a roadmap though, goals, we are in the process of looking into, we thought that study already existed with those numbers, but apparently we can't find it. So we are in the process of getting that information as far as the cost to clean up the whole area, so. But you're right, that's gonna be done, that's number one, that's step one.
That's the point that I made at that meeting in December, that we need to address this piece first. We need to find out what the abatement plan is, then implement it with the demolition, and so we know what the cost is. First of all, we need to.
Right, but there's nothing wrong with what we're doing, trying to get,
No,
trying to
just-
set up a goal and a roadmap.
We know where we're going as a council, that the demolition is what we're looking at doing right now. This other stuff is, I don't want to put this the wrong way, but it's keeping them busy, keeping this project moving forward, so we're not just sitting there saying, okay, let's wait till it's done, and then we keep moving. We're keeping them, we're trying to keep them busy, so that as we get to that point, we have more answers, that we're not slowing the process down. Some of the things that I'd like to see the group do is, as well as looking at these, and bringing in other groups to help run the centers. I think that as a group, you guys need to go look at, like Smithfield, like Lincoln, like North Kingstown, that already have senior centers and community centers, and go and see what actually they have in their buildings, so we have a better idea of what we may need in our buildings and how they use their buildings. Because it's not just a simple thing of people coming in and using. There are dedicated spaces for a lot of programs that the seniors have. AARP has a representative sitting there, so if you have questions, healthcare people put someone in there, so if you have questions about your Medicaid benefits and stuff. And so we need to understand that all of these components need to be in this building as well. But the best way to do that is to go and see what other communities are doing in their buildings as well.
Yeah, and we started doing that process, Scott has gone over and down to see North Kingston, he came back and presented some items to us. Lori has gone out to see a couple up and Rob has gone up to the ones in Uxbridge. Chris and I went to one, I forgot the name of the town, but we have been doing that. We have been researching, okay, not just senior centers, but we've also been looking at community-based centers. Mr. Mountain has gone out to Barville and reported back. So we've all kind of have gone and looked to see what other towns have. So now we've kind of come back and it's like, okay, we understand what other towns have now, but let's now identify what's going to work best for our town. So we have gone through that process.
The only follow-up, with regard to Ray's comments, this is a bit of a collaborative effort. We were charged with certain tasks, so we performed them. And we did highlight very clearly early on that, yes, after we established that none of the buildings were worth saving, the logical next step was to abate them and demolish them. But that's where our jurisdiction ends. It then goes to the council. And the point you're making is 100%. That needs to be prioritized, which is part of what this committee discussed at our last meeting. To really urge the council to do exactly what Ray is requesting. Find the money, however it is that you're able to do that. And then simultaneously, so that we don't have that big gap, is, we tread water, if you will, by starting to develop more concrete conceptual plans, so that when it's abated and when it's demolished, we don't have to wait that 2 years to fill the void. That design is progressing, and you guys, along with us, are making those progressive decisions. So hopefully, things run in consecutive order. But no, we're 100% members have indicated, even from a public safety point of view, the idea of leveling the sites. Yeah.
And Robert, you're exactly right. I mean, that's exactly how it should go. I personally think it's long overdue. The property is a pain in my neck. Something needs to happen now, not 2 years from now. We've already been sitting on it for a couple of years. So therefore, with all these wonderful ideas, that's wonderful. But we need to take the first step before we get to the second and third and the fourth step. And that money needs to be put into the next budget or wherever it's gonna come from to move forward. So that we can continue this committee's hard work of what they've already started and move forward to whatever plan and whatever we want to do down there. But we need to take care of the property as it exists today. And I know we all have those reports from the trust. We know where we stand. I'll bang this box every night long. We need to address this sooner than later. And that's all I have to say. I just don't know where the funds are gonna come from. I know 400,000 is out there. It's not enough money. Nobody's gonna convince me that's not enough money to demolish that project. So, I think that that's the first task that the council has to address.
Very honestly, if everything gets abated, you give me a bulldozer and I'll be more than happy to drive that.
Oh, I know
If that's gonna save us a couple bucks, I will be more, I'm always begging the contractors that I work with, they let me have the first swing at some of these buildings. So, I mean, if you need to have a bulldozer that's near retirement, and we just need to go through it, get it abated, and then we'll take care of it. I know there was another, suggestion from our previous planner that we treat it similar to the Stamina Mill building that was down here on School Street. Rather than abating it, they misted the air and just demolished the buildings as they stood and then carted everything up. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if the ability to abate and then that becomes a fire department training exercise. I don't know if that's possible. So then at the end of the day, all we have to do is take care of foundation. I think that we could probably try to think a little creatively about it, but also, just keep in mind, keeping everybody in the surrounding neighbors safe. But trust me, I want to be on that bulldozer going down some of those buildings. So I completely can sympathize with the fact that that needs to get demolished.
I just don't want to lose sight of the initial
Right.
plan that we have to take care of.
Yep.
And then everything else will fall into place after that.
Yep.
That's all I'm saying.
And
I believe the council is doing that. We're in that process. We've got the abatement plan coming, so that we can submit it for demolition.
Mrs. Murphy, I'm sorry.
Yeah, if I may, just so everybody's up to speed, I'll get the exact dollar amount tomorrow. But this Weston and Sampson, they got paid out of that. It was over 400,000. They got paid out of that. This testing that's going to be done is going to be coming out, so we're below 400,000. But depending on this point, it's going to be big money to do the first step. I want to echo everybody what you in your report. Step number one, let's take care of these. Someone is going to get hurt. You're going to have someone go in, maybe some kids, or maybe someone that's seeking shelter. It's what we used to call an attractive nuisance. That's the first step. Take those buildings down.
Mr. DeJean is right, though. I mean, there's no reason why we can't look to step number 2, 3, and 4, even while we're trying to get number 1 done. It's good to know which direction we're going. We can do more than one thing at a time. We can walk and chew gum.
Yeah, I think the intent of our letter, obviously underscoring the demolition part, is that we're all thinking that a lot of these items are happening concurrently. Because we can't do, if we were do 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, we're gonna be here until, we're not gonna have a plan until 2030, which just isn't feasible. So I mean, we have a 9-member board, we're pretty good at juggling. So I think we can keep things on track and on task by working on all these various other points too.
Yeah, I just want to, and I couldn't agree more with what Ray said. It's just 3 years ago almost now, we had a meeting in Halliwell. and we talked about this. You were there, Paul, you remember, 3 years ago, and nothing's happened. You're 100% right. We've got to mitigate the hazard right away. I hope Paul's wrong about somebody getting hurt there, but it's worrisome. We have a liability as a town with what we have on that site right now. And we have to remove that liability. We have to mitigate that hazard. And that's gonna happen as soon as humanly possible.
I think everybody's in agreement on that, yeah. But I would disagree that, I mean, if you look at the building, you would say nothing's happened down there, but I mean, a lot has happened, right? We formed this committee, we have a plan, we have a potential partner that we're looking into, potentially partnering with somebody. We know we have an order, we know, kind of have an order of importance of things that we have to accomplish. So, yeah, if you look at the building, nothing's happening down there, but things are happening.
We've set ourselves up for a great potential future. Let's take that first step.
Right.
Thank you.
Anybody else? This is just, very informal, so just feel free to speak up.
Well, and I'm not gonna be repetitious about this, and what Tony said is exactly right. It's been 2 or 3 years, nobody's done a thing about it. And I gotta be honest with you, I may be partially responsible for that, but I'm not the person that makes the call at the end of the day. We need money to do this. So now we need to get this taken care of. Now, not a year from now, not 2 years from now, and you can have all the committees run concurrently for the next 5 years. It comes down to this, it comes down to the money. I mean, I'm putting my budgets together now, and I don't have money to buy a truck. But we're talking like $4, $5, $6, $1 million. This is my company. To do the initial step, not get into conceptual thought or whatever the plan may be in the future. So I just don't want to see us jumping into the, like I said, into the fast lane, or we've even considered what we're doing. It's all great ideas, and you can keep those ideas and move forward. But this isn't going to happen overnight. We have seniors at Scouts Hall. I hear people say that that's not enough. I don't hear any complaints though. There's not maybe a handful of people that go there. So there's things that we can work out in the interim before we come to this plan that we eventually go to, which could be 4 or 5 years down the road. But we need to make that initial step. And if the council is the person or the body that has to make that initial step with the advice of the administration, then that's what we have to do. But we need to do that now. I've been sitting for 3 years, since 2019, when that property was turned over to us, and nothing's been done. I've got vandalism, I got people in the buildings, I got people being arrested in the buildings. I need this to stop. It needs to end.
What I might put forward to the council is that we have our abatement, the testing done, which comes with an abatement cost, that's essentially going to say how much it's going to cost to abate. Would it be pertinent for the solicitor to put together an RFP to go out to bid for demolition and abatement, that once we get that abatement report, that we can immediately put that out to bid, and then we will have an idea of what that number, we can have at least 3 bids to understand what that number is. And then, you can simply put it in the RFP that goes out to bid for contractors and demolition, that they have to hold their price for 60 days. We can understand what the costs are going to be. We can look at and ascertain what inflation might be if we can't do something within those 60 days and award the project. But at least that way, we'll have our abatement plan. We'll have potential contractors looking to demolish the building and a number so that you folks can make a final decision. And then that way, we're still moving expeditiously, but we're not putting, it doesn't require a whole lot of effort at this point. It just requires an RFP for contractors to come and look at the building, read the abatement report, and then they can say, okay, the price is gonna be X, Y, or Z. And I think that would, probably make Mr. Pendergast feel much better, because then we'll know, we'll have a definitive cost. And if there's some way that, we can find in the budget that there's, monies available that can be utilized for that, great. If not, and we have to do a little bit more digging or, going into our pocketbooks to figure out where that money could potentially come from, then at least we know and have a dollar amount associated with the demolition of those buildings.
Didn't the last administration, didn't they have somebody give them a number? But
Yes. I don't know what that is. I was at the meeting when that one individual company, Providence, looked at two buildings. He's going to give a price on one or two buildings. Supposedly, the past administrator got that. I'm not privy to that number, never have that.
that was for the whole site then.
That was for one building or two. And as I was part of that conversation, that individual who owns that company said the price of one building is not the same as the price of 12 or 13. So I can't answer that question. Only one person can answer that.
Okay.
Well, I mean, on a positive note, we all know that this has to be done. That there's nothing to hide. So all this committee did was get to the point where with the paid consultant, give the judgment to the council that no buildings were salvageable. There were no use. That was agreed upon. So then the next step now, since it's outside of this committee's domain, it goes back to the council to then say, okay, we've agreed that this is what we need to do. And then you have to find that path forward to achieve that objective. However it is that the internal administrative duties and responsibilities work. And then at your direction, we would either continue to solicit the architecturals so that we continue to be viable, and then present designs that we either put on the shelf once they're done, or we go forward because the demolition has made progress. So I mean, it's still a positive thing. At least you've identified the fact that everyone is in agreement that none of those structures are of any value. So now you have a path forward that's clearly defined from a positive perspective.
Anybody else? Well, I think we had a little schooling tonight. Little update.
And I think really what we're looking for from council tonight is some action items based on our letters so that we can continue our charge. So that would be revising our resolution that forms us to include those last 5 things. So while the demolition and abatement is being figured out, we can at least continue concurrently a plan forward to as Councilman Van said, to keep us busy. Otherwise, we're just going to be sitting, waiting for you guys to say, okay, it's time to do the next step. And I think we still have a lot of positive momentum amongst the committee members and amongst the community. There's still a lot of interest and a lot of good feedback that we've been getting from folks in town to continue moving forward. So I think, again, what we'll be looking for from the council tonight is ultimately an action item to revise our resolution so that we can continue working and we can potentially bring on an architectural and engineering firm to start that master plan. Because once those buildings are down, we need to figure out, we're going to need a plan to start moving forward with. And if that master plan becomes phased or it's all in, or, if we have the ability to get that master plan and identify, okay, what do folks want to see? What does this building look like? What kind of programmatic elements are in there? What rooms, similar to what the police station has gone through with the Tecton. Really identifying what the layout of this new building is going to be, what the layout of the property is going to be. Weston and Sampson brought us up to a point, but now their responsibilities and their job has ended. So we're now at the point where we need to bring on more professionals to continue the exploration and then narrowing down really what the plan moving forward is going to be in the future.
Jeff, I'm just a little confused though. If we're gonna explore the avenue of going down and partnering with, just say, for example, the YMCA, then wouldn't that be, shouldn't we wait to see what their input is gonna be, what their assistance is gonna be, and they're gonna probably be more able to guide us in that direction. We could go along and get this, what you wanna do, we could do everything you wanna do, then the YMCA goes, no, that's not how we do it. It's not how we design our buildings. If you notice, a lot of the lines look somewhat similar, and they might say, no, that's not how we design our buildings, and we're like, okay, that's all for nothing now, let's go with the YMCA plan. I think we should decide that we're gonna go down the avenue of trying to build a partnership. And if not, then come back, then I'm thinking, then say, oh, we're talking to the YMCA, they're not interested, and then, okay, now we go this way, but are we gonna partner, or are we gonna go alone and get our own proposal?
I think you want to look at it as that we're really bringing on two consultants at this point. One to help us survey the community, understand the needs and the wants, but then the YMCA doesn't have the capabilities to figure out what the building's going to look like. They don't have architects on staff to say, okay, the building is going to look like a brick facade building with storefront windows and glazing and structural steel sticking out. They don't have the capabilities of doing that. They're more interested in serving the needs of the community, where we're going to need an architect and an engineer to figure out, okay, here are the needs that the Y has helped us figure out. Now we're going to build a building to fit those needs. So it's really, you got to look at it as two consultants working with us to progress this as we move forward.
And to kind of bring further, we're just talking about a master plan, right? This site certainly is not in a vacuum. We have other town-owned sites. We have, I don't know what the inventory is. I don't know if everybody does, of town-owned land. But if we should identify the need for a school down the road, if we should identify that we need a police station and the current location is not the correct location, what other potential is there to site these facilities on other town-owned land? So as far as a master plan goes, how I look at it is, let's look at this site, but let's look what the town's inventory is overall, and how does this potential usage fit in with everything else? And so it shouldn't just be the vacuum of the Halliwell site, but what's best for the entire town now, and as Paul mentioned, 20 years from now, what are we going to need? So let's look at the big picture. Maybe the town planner could provide some insight to that. I know I've seen them. There's some maps, some pretty good sized maps that show all the town-owned property. I don't know how updated they are, but I think we as a group should be looking at the big picture and not just the site.
I do think what is outlined currently in the comp plan is really the roadmap for the entire town. So we have that document. However, it's outdated now. It was passed in October 2019. The planning board has made some edits to it. We're trying to get it in front of the council so that we can update it to include, because right now the comp plan still talks about renovating this building. There's been comments made by the police chief that they would very much like to stay in the location that they are. The superintendent has made comments at many planning board meetings and other school building committee meetings where he has said he likes all the schools close together because it doesn't make any sense to have the situation that we had, to have one school on the northern side of the town and then 3 other schools at the south side of the town. So I think, we need to keep in mind that we do have a comprehensive plan that really outlines that. But the comprehensive plan also doesn't mention anything about communities. So the planning board, I know we're trying to update the comp plan to reflect these goals that we've achieved. But we just haven't gotten it in from council yet to move forward.
As a follow-up, Mr. President, the point you made is quite valid, that you wouldn't want to start on a design and then have your collaborative partners say exactly what you said. You know, we have the 4-star architectural firm that we always use. However, when we had our initial meeting, we touched on this idea, and they were not the least bit restrictive in saying, oh, we only use our conceptual design A or B. They were non-committal. So it kind of left the door open that, well, committee, you do whatever you want with the design, and then we will fit into your box that you built. So that was very good because they didn't they didn't play every card in their hand, but they were extremely straightforward in saying it's an open palette, open canvas, you can do whatever you want. So it leans towards maybe a more definitive circumstance of us saying, yes, the committee's made it very clear, we'd like to meet with them again. And as our chairman said, if Boys Club or any other organization presents itself, we'll meet with them too. But since YMCA came first, we'll flush that out and then report back. But simultaneously, if we can start interviewing for the architecturals, at least we're moving in a forward position, because we know that no matter what we do, the plan is not to level the ground and just grow grass. Worst case scenario, if we spend all the money we have, we can still do extensive, non-structure related functions on that property for the benefit of the townspeople, trails, things of that nature. So no matter what happens, there is, and that's this master plan that Jeff always speaks of, is not just that one building. It's how do you look at the whole property? How do we serve the exterior improvements and the structural improvements? So I think if you give us the authority to solicit those bids for architectural design and simultaneously give us the authority to go further with the why and come back to you and say, okay, we had 3 meetings and here's our presentation. Then at some point you decide whether this is a fit for the town or it's not. And then the next course presents itself. So at least we can then continue to do positive things.
All right, this is your area of expertise, okay? So excuse me if I sound simple on this, but I'm oversimplifying it. But suppose you go hire this architect and he comes up with a beautiful little building. Then you go to the Y and they're like, well, who's your pool gonna go? There's no room for a pool, there's no room for a small indoor track, there's no room for a basketball court. Shouldn't you be consulting with them before and get an idea of what the direction we want to go before you hand it over to an architect?
We'd be doing it at the same time. We would be inviting them to the table at the same time as the architects there, so that they can hear, if we do decide to go with Y, they can come in during the design phase with, especially with this initial design, master planning. Architect lays out their plans for the whole property. Folks from the YMCA could come in and say, we looked at that aspect at one project that we did over in another town. That worked really well, or that didn't work as well, and here's what we might recommend to rectify it, to make sure that it does work well. So it would be giving them a seat at the table as well to help inform what the design is, what takes shape on the property. It wouldn't be, we're just acting in 2 completely different bubbles. We're all kind of, like I said, at the same table. And when the architect comes and presents plans to us, we would expect that, a representative from whatever community organization we're working with would have someone to come and look at the plans. We share those plans, not only with the town, but with the folks that we might be partnering with, so that they can look at them and analyze them. It wouldn't be, it wouldn't be separated. It would be all very much a collaborative, based approach on this. And typically, this would be like the first instance that I have worked on a community center that has incorporated another community-based group pre-design or during the design. What happened down in Lincoln, the one off 146, is that the town of Lincoln built that building, and I might be incorrect in saying the story, but I believe this is what, if I remember correctly, my brain might be going for the evening. They had said the town of Lincoln built that building themselves. They were looking to staff it themselves, run it themselves. The first couple of years, that didn't go so well, so they invited the Y in to come help them run the facility. The Y came in, they helped run the facility, and now it's running the way it's running, which is pretty successful because I've been down there a couple of times myself. So it's not that we would have the YMCA dictate something that the town might want. It's not that we would have the architect dictate what they would recommend. It's really making sure that we have that open discussion and allowing everybody to, voice their opinions, understand what the town needs, and then identifying those needs, and then making sure that we address them within the design.
Mr. President, we're jumping too far ahead of the game. We're putting this whole plan on the YMCA. Too far ahead of the game. There's still way too much investigative work for you guys to do. So many options to look at that we're not even close. That's the only thing I agree with you on. We're way too early to hire an architectural firm as an RFQ to stop this project. There's way too much investigative work and potential uses for you guys to look at. We're not even close to that point yet. That's the only thing I agree. But putting the Y into the picture, it may be. I'm not saying don't pursue that, but you're jumping way too far ahead of it. You just focus on that Y issue to get that issue. Let them keep looking at it, but it's not. There's too many things to investigate right now. Too many unknowns, too many potentials. Let's look at this, let's look at that, and everything. You don't need an architect yet.
So then my response to that would be, what else are you looking for us to investigate? We've gone through a survey process, we've gone through a charrette, we've heard from the town that this really needs to be a community-based project. I've heard that this comment from you before, so I'm just curious, what other items are we looking to investigate? The Tecton architect said that this is an inappropriate place to put a police station. The fire station, I don't believe is an appropriate place to put down here either, because there's no second means of egress for vehicles. So if you could elaborate what that further investigation would be.
I'm not telling you to look and see what else you want to put down there. I just think that there's a lot more investigative work needs to be done, just if you want to put this community center there, before we even make that decision on what we're doing. There just needs to be more looking at it. Do we want to look at other sites in the town? Do we want to look at other potential collaboration and stuff? There's more things I think that need to be done before we get to the point of hiring an architect in this game.
So then
There's still too many things out there. And the big elephant in the room is, what is going to be the cost to demo this thing? So before we go out and spend more money, I think we need to get a handle on what we're looking to do right now immediately. I agree with you, Ray, on that one, that, yeah, it's kind of been lagging a little bit. COVID had something to do with it a little bit. And a lot of different issues been going on. We've been looking at this thing for a year. I've said it all along, the first and foremost thing we need to do is figure out what we're doing with that site, what's being demoed and what's not being demoed. We went down the road with Weston and Sampson. I personally wasn't completely pleased with their results. They were supposed to do a complete land use study of all the potential different uses for it, and it got really narrowed down very quickly into a senior community center. That's okay. That's the direction that we want to go in. That's the direction that we're looking in. But we're way too far, way too early to hire an architect. Start looking at and doing things. We need to get a handle on what we're doing. You guys can keep investigating all of these different options that are out there. I'm not trying to slow you down. I'm not trying to stop you. They're all great ideas. I like all of them. But we need to figure out exactly what we're doing. Remember, this is the board that will make the decision. And so we get you guys to advise us, and you're doing good, and like we're here. But let's get the first piece done, get a handle on that before we start spending that money.
Then I would request that the council expands our charge to have the ability to look at all the town-owned properties. Because right now, our charge is to look at this property and this property only. Understanding that myself is on the planning board, I have a vague idea, pretty good idea of where the rest of the town properties are going. However, like I said, our comprehensive plan is only just last updated in 2019 of October. And things have been completed on that, and it needs to be updated again to include what the items that are going on in the police station. It needs to check this box off that we renovated this building. So there's more, I think, the investigative actions that you would like us to take, we need more direction on, but we also need an expansion of our resolution to say, look at all these other town properties. If we're to understand how we're gonna need a school in the next potential school in the next 10 years, we need to have that information. You know, it's one of those things that I feel that the investigation that we've done thus far this is it. So, I guess I'm just confused at what else are you expecting from us? Are you looking for us to say we're not recommending a fire station go down there? Are you looking to us to say we're not recommending a police station go down there? Are you looking to us to say we now looked at all the town-owned properties and we're recommending that a school potentially be placed at this location? We could utilize this area as a community center, but it only has one ingress and egress for cars. Or there's, this other parcel that's landlocked, which is going to be useless for everybody. So I think what I would just like to request is what further investigations? I just like to be a little bit.
Yeah, let's clear up something. Let's clear up the big miscommunication here, okay? No one has ever said put a fire department in. Nobody on this board has ever said that. Nobody, because number one, the fire department is not a town department. We don't own either fire station, and all we own is the fire trucks that they drive. That's what the town owns. We don't own anything else. So, and if you talk to the chief, they don't want to be at Halliwell either, for the same reason the police don't want to be there. It's too restricted site. It's not where they belong. It's not where their calls come from. But we don't own the fire department, so I don't know why people keep throwing that in there. We don't own the fire department. We don't own either station. You have it on your plan, but we don't own that station. Primrose or North Smithfield, Fire Rescue on St. Paul, we don't own either station.
I think you might just be saying that because there were some of the survey
I
results.
understand that. People made the comments, but I'm just trying to clarify. The fire department has nothing to do with the town other than that we fund it as a contracted service and we provide them with vehicles to provide the service. That's the extent of our hands with the fire department. The police department is being looked at by the task force and it's being looked at and we're trying to get to a resolution on that. It's not part of this plan. Right? The whole thing was, there's money that was put in the bond to address Halliwell School. That's why we're looking at that site. I just think that there's more work that needs to be done in regards to this community center than just saying, we want a community center. You've offered where you have partnerships and you have other programming that you want to look at. I just think that there's more work, more investigative work that you guys could be doing to present a better plan before we get to the point of having it's not a complete plan yet. It's still a big cloud, fluffy plan. And the other thing is, like I said, we need to know what our cost is to demo before I start spending more money to hire other, not at that point yet. I just don't.
But I think to Jeff's point is that an architect will help us get, not necessarily an architect to build a building, but an architect will help us to map out the use of that property from passive recreation, splash pad, some active stuff, outdoors, but also the building. You want to put a gym in there. You want to put an activity room in there. Except for Jeff, I'm not a builder. I recreate. I'm a recreator. You give me a building, I can figure out something to do with it, but you give me that piece of land, I need a professional to come in and say, you can sit this here. So I think with that, that's what we're trying to
get to the next step is, can we have somebody, a professional come in and help us build out a plan for that property? We have ideas, we've got input from the community. So we can start to drill down on those ideas. But I think to know if those ideas fit within that property, we might need a professional. As far as the YMCA goes, I wouldn't put all the eggs in the basket for the YMCA. I think it's a good partner to look into. But the town has to, and maybe we as a board need to make a decision. Do we want this property to be town-owned property? And we own the building and we care for the building, and then we figure out how activities are run on that property and within whatever structure is built? Or do we want the Y, the Boys Club, to then build that building, own that property? Because I work in Cranston. 25 years ago, there was a community center built there. The city put money into it. CCAP put money into it. The YMCA got to run programs out of there. And over the course of that partnership, it deteriorated to the point where the Y was in there, took no care of the building whatsoever, to the point where the city had to go in. We've taken it over. We've renovated the building. So that partnership now does not exist anymore. So I enter into the Y with a little bit of hesitation. So we would need to be very clear as far as what is our relationship with the Y and what is our relationship to that land. Does the town own it? Is the Y going to take ownership of it? So I wouldn't totally feel comfortable jumping in with the Y just yet without a lot of discussion.
See, I'm not married to the idea of the Y, but I was just making a point that if that's the route we're gonna go, then would we have them on board? Would we be jumping the gun by hiring an architect if that was the route we were gonna go? That's all I was saying. I wasn't saying it's gonna have to be a Y.
I'm agreeing with you, but we're not at that point yet to get an architect on board.
But I don't want to send these guys, we gave these guys a charge. I don't want to send them down the rabbit hole now and have them come up with give them a whole different. We gave them it and they did their job and they did it well. So they came up with plan number 5, correct? They explained what plan number 5 was. I'm not sure where, I'm kind of, it's up to you in your call. Like, I'm not sure where you want them to go from here at this point.
So if I may, as an architect, I want to really emphasize, master planning is the investigation that Mr. Vadney is looking for us to do. The master plan is that investigation. Other than myself, we've been dedicating quite a bit of time to this process, to this project, to this property. I can't, as a licensed architect, now go and be the one that does up this master plan with the committee. We need the professional to come in and do a master plan that will assist us in doing the further investigations. If you read the RFQ that I put forward to you folks quite a few meetings ago, the RFQ asks for 3 concepts that build off concept 5. With those concepts, we ask for estimating, we ask for civil services, we ask for landscape services, the whole, basically the whole deal that you need for a master plan. And that master plan is, now hearing Mr. Vadney talk a little bit more, that master plan is our further investigation, because we've also requested in that RFQ that we have 2 to 3 more community meetings to gather more input. That would be facilitated similarly to the charrette that we had back in July. So I'm trying to figure out the disconnect, because I don't want there to be a disconnect. I want everybody to be on the same page. But I think at this point, we do need an architect and an engineering firm to come in and assist us with that master plan. Once that master plan is narrowed down on, after we explore some other further iterations of concept number 5, then we come back to you with a cost estimate, an idea of how much everything's going to cost, a potential phasing plan. If the property needs to be phased, if you folks felt the need that, okay, we're going to implement phase 1, which is going to be, making sure that there's all the recreation, passive recreation throughout the property, then that's the first, in the parking lots, that's the first phase. The building's going to be the second one. But that master plan is going to further further our investigations to identify what the town wants at that property.
So, back up to the council head. I think one of the things that Tony discussed was, let's identify the property the town already owns. Right past that is. What if we had a piece of property in town that we already own? That you can put a community center on? You know, Halliwell's out of the picture. So why are we bringing an architect? Put it at Halliwell, but it may not go to Halliwell. It may go to property A, B, or C. Okay, so the plan is the plan. I have to agree. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves here before steps 1 and 2.
But they're not really getting ahead of themselves, because we never told them at the beginning, right, that, we never told them at the beginning, that you guys figure everything out, and maybe, you know, let's look at all the, we told them, look at Halliwell, we gave them a very narrow focus. We said, look at Halliwell. It's not their fault that they're not trying to think of what's going on all around us.
I don't think it's anybody's fault. I think it's great. I think it's a great plan. I think it's conceptually, it's great. But what happens if it's at location A, B? And Halliwell's out of the game. Halliwell's not even in the game anymore. What about that? Because we just talked about identifying other property in town that possibly could be used.
I know,
Other sources.
I understand that, but we gave them a job, right? We said, Halliwell.
They're done. Their job's done. They already presented their job. Now we're going on to step 2 of their job. They're asking for a new charge. Give them a new charge. Identify property in town that can be used for other purposes. Am I missing something here? We're talking in circles.
We didn't read the issue. They did, number one. And that was like, this is my point, is that I want to keep them going. And so no different than the task force that you already told me that I sit on. We're on like the 6th task. You give us a task, we complete it, give you a report. You give us a new task, we complete it, give you a report. We completed this, or we did. And so you keep moving. And you identify the task, and maybe this is where we go, but I just think this thing needs more investigative work, and I'm not ready to spend more money until I have a handle on what I'm spending the money to, which is abatement and demolition.
One clarification, I think, because we're going in the same direction, but on different highways here. I don't think anyone in our committee disagrees. We're all on board with, and we've had these conversations. The idea of even adding to this building, this buildable land right there. And we have asked on at least 2 occasions for the list of properties. But we wanted to stay within our lane. We didn't want to start to go outside our lane and then offend members of the council who look at us and say, well, that's not what we asked you to do. So it could be, and if we do, say we look at parcel 3, wherever that is. And our collective opinion is that, yeah, it looks like, but that's not good enough. That's when you then need the input of the architectural firm to say, yeah, your instincts are correct. We could do this. Here's the superimposed structure. Your underground utilities won't facilitate. So we shouldn't fixate that this architectural firm and the master plan that we may have initially presented, as the president has said, because we were charged to do that for Halliwell, that same architectural firm that at this point, all we're asking for is the RFP to solicit the bid to say this is what it would cost. Then part of that, if we say, okay, now we've looked at 3 other parcels within the town that we want you to add to your, and give us a number. What would you charge us to investigate parcel 2 and 3? So something has to happen. And none of us are in the, other than Jeff and possibly myself, because I'm a builder. But it's not our responsibility to say whether we could build something down the street. It may be our responsibility if we're told to investigate it and say it's viable. But still, it comes back to the engineers and the architects, who are the professionals who take the conceptual idea, just like running a water main. We know, yeah, we want the water main here, but that's all we know. Until they tell us what they want, and how it's gonna work, we can't price it. So I really think we should go forward with at least soliciting the bids. So you have a proposal, and then you can do nothing with it if you choose that that's the best thing. And yes, you can add it to your total budget when you then see what the cost of demolition is gonna be in real dollars. And simultaneously, if you tell us to do it, we can look at the other property maps and walk around them and say, yeah, this is viable, no, it's not. Report back to you, and you either say, no, this is a good idea, that's a bad idea. But the next step was still to engage the professionals to take what we think is an idea and legitimize it, and either say, if he was wearing another hat and he was there as a professional and not as a council member, he would need to look at it and say, great idea, it doesn't have any merit, or it's a wonderful idea. So we need both. We'll do whatever you tell us to do, and we all have spoken about this, so there's no objection, I don't believe, from any member of the committee. But at some point in the near future, you are gonna need professionals to start solidifying the concept, and also to give you some idea, because what we're asking for is projected cost. It's all a fairy tale until we start looking at cost. But we can't get there without the help of the professionals.
So what I might recommend, after we've had quite a bit of discussion this evening. The RFQ process for an architectural and engineering firm takes time. It takes about a month, month and a half, 2 months. What I might recommend, and if I'm speaking for myself at this point, get our abatement and testing done. Get the cost for the abatement from our consultant that we've already hired, that's going to be doing the work. During that time, put together an RFP that calls for the demolition of all 11 buildings of property. Ask the solicitor to put that RFP together. Once we have that abatement plan, that all can be issued. The RFP will give you the ability to identify the cost of the demolition of the building. At the same time, when you put out the RFP for demolition, you put out the RFQ for architectural and engineering services. You'll have about a month for the demolition RFP. You'll get a definitive price. After the 2 months, and then we'll be 1 month into the RFP process, and then there'll be a couple more weeks after that. We'll have the cost of the demolition, and at that point, we'll have qualified professionals submitting their qualifications to us as a committee to review, interview, and eventually recommend to the council. So by the time we go through this RFQ process for an architectural and engineering firm, we're going to be in the end of April, beginning of May. You could already have a bid for demolition of the buildings by mid-April. I don't anticipate that the testing and the abatement plan are going to be any more than 2 or 3 weeks out from when they do their testing next week. And Ray, you can correct me if I'm wrong with their schedule. And while they're doing their testing in their abatement plan, you could ask the solicitor to pen that RFP for demolition. It's really not that difficult RFP to write. If you like, you could change our charge that the committee writes the RFP, provides it to you. David could look it over, and then it goes out. However you folks want to see that go down, we're certainly amenable to it. But I think, as I said earlier, we can have a lot of these things going on concurrently. I don't think we're jumping the gun by asking to go forward with an RFQ, because the solicitor hasn't even looked at it yet. You haven't voted to approve it, to put it out there, to have the finance director issue it. There could be, at the next meeting, you could be reviewing it. Mrs. Igliozzi could have comments. There's a lot of time that goes into an RFQ process. So honestly, we wouldn't have an architectural or engineering firm until April or May. So just thinking about the process and how we can move forward, because again, I agree with some of the statements tonight that we're starting to go in circles. Let's outline a path that we can move forward with. So if that's the path that we want to move forward with, that's great, but that's not up to us, it's gonna be up to you for tonight. But I think what we're all looking for is further direction and the ability to continue where our charge has essentially ended at this point.
Right, in your experience, in a perfect world, just human, in a perfect world, we have the money to do it. We go out right now, we go out tomorrow, and we get, we find out, we get costs for demolition and a big one. We have the money to do it supposedly. How long are we looking at? And if everything went perfect, we're still looking, before that place is clear down to the ground, you're still looking at over a year, right?
I would.
You don't think so?
No, I would say, yeah.
Once you award it and it gets going, you can put timeframes into these things too, start date, end date. I'm a big stickler on start date, end date, language contract, they're important. They're really important to have start date, end dates. So when you award the bid, you know when it's going to be done. This is not a year's job, this is 2 or 3, once they get in there, 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Well, that's the case, I tend to agree with Jeff then. I mean, there's no reason why we can't, at least go for an RFQ for the,
Well, I think, and
for the
I
architect.
agree with you. I think that is a possibility, and that should maybe move forward with your direction. I also agree that we shouldn't be paying any more money before we know the initial cost of what step one is.
So you won't have it, when you hire an architect by state air struggle law, it's gonna be a qualification process, no proposals, no money. You hire them based on their qualifications. That's your one. Then you interview them, find out what their costs are. Once you choose on a matrix who the best qualified is, then if you can't come to a conclusion on a price, you go to the next guy. So it's a process, right? And
It is a process.
drawing up the RFQ is a pretty detailed thing for you, looking to really spell it out, it's a little bit of time to figure out.
Yeah, and we do have, originally back in October, November, we put together a draft RFQ for your consideration. And I know that ruffled some feathers and was certainly not meant to. But it was because we wanted to make sure that we are continuing with the momentum that we have. And I think that our committee members are feeling like we are now starting to slow down quite a bit. And we don't want to take our foot off the gas pedal. We want to keep going. Working in public bid work for the past 10 years, I understand it's a slow process. There's more technical bits here and there that I care to deal with at some points, but you know, it's laid out in the law that some of these things have to be done the way they're done. And honestly, I just want to make sure that we are continuing to move forward and we just don't become stale. Because once we become stale, nothing's going to happen down there.
Okay, so can we agree as a council, I'm just asking now, can we agree as a council, first and foremost, abatement and demolition?
We've already done, we've already got the,
Okay. So we agree that that's gonna be done, that's number one. And can we further agree then, while this is all going on, while we're still getting our prices for the demolition and everything, we go for the RFQ. What's the harm? It's not costing us anything to get an RFQ. And then while that's all going on, you guys can further explore potential partnerships. And we can see if that's a road that we can go down. And I don't know, does that sound like a good path to go down? Does everybody kind of agree with that one? Anybody? Yeah, we can do that. Also, we can, at that point, I mean, at any point in time, we can increase the scope of your responsibilities.
You know, I just want to say, when you look at this, right, what a tremendous gift we've been given as a town, right? Fantastic. We had a school there, and it took us years to get rid of Halliwell. We wanted to get rid of it for so long, and we finally did. And now we've been given this great gift. A lot's changed in the last 3 years. We talk about a master plan. And since the school's been closed, a lot's changed in town. And now we're talking about the need for potentially a police station or whatever else it is. I can tell you, I signed up for this, not to do what's best for Halliwell site, but to help with what's best for the whole town. So hopefully that's the direction we're gonna be going in as well.
I agree. I think if you're gonna put 2 bullet items, action items, and the third should be to specifically tell us to investigate the other properties that we own, to see if there is capacity there for.
They gave us a narrow scope, John, you're right. But a lot's changed.
The only other comment I'm gonna make, in the administrators here, I would just, suggest, to the administrator, that the finance director get involved in this. I'm not satisfied as the department head here. It's very valuable. I think the finance director should be heavily involved in this. And the 400,000, that's all I know.
Right.
So any other future meetings before the council, I think the finance director should be here to let you know what we have financially for these projects, whether it's pending bond, you have a police station that's it's still being talked about in limbo. That's not a done deal.
Since you brought it up, we also have, we have to increase our fire personnel. That's another expense coming down the pipe, okay? Police fire, we get, yeah,
I think the finance director, I think we need some financial input here.
and we gotta come up with a list of priorities and, we're gonna get these things done.
And I think that's why we're looking to, the assistant town planner and the town planner to kind of help us identify grants for what we're looking at. Understanding that the big picture of the town budget, there's a lot of different needs right now to address. So I think making sure that we're utilizing our resources appropriately, that we try to identify grants that we can go after. Because I know as much as I'm never really the money guy, we have a lot of other money guys in our committee. So I let them, keep an eye on that. And that's always been a question that's come up at many of our meetings. It's like, okay, but we need to know how much things are going to cost. And again, master plan cost estimate is associated with that. Well, I know we have to pay the architects and the engineers anyway, but and identify where that money's going to come from. But big picture, how we're going to fund whatever is over here at this property, we are going to want to be looking at grants and utilizing those, understanding that we're not other towns that might have the ability to spend money left and right.
Open time to the mic.
Because none of it's not on the agenda, so we can all take it into consideration today and then have to put it on a future agenda, because we really can't do anything with our own.
Could this potentially be an item that is carried under the old business of your town council? I'm not sure. I defer to the solicitor, but I know taking action items, I believe the agenda had said that, for discussion, consideration, and action, the recommendations from the Halliwell Review Committee. So we do have those 2 letters that formally provide our recommendations. So I don't know, because they're not listed specifically, what that means.
We actually have to have a resolution drawn up to go on.
Okay.
But we can add that to the agenda for Wednesday. We have time to add that to the agenda. We need to.
Joey, we get that on there? It's not sent up yet, right? You're still good, right? Still good time?
So the clerk is also working on the amendment because of the executive decision to continue Zoom meetings, so. I'm assuming, we'll do it, probably don't have that done, but that has to be addressed too. So.
She doesn't do a lot. She doesn't have a lot to do, right, Joey?
Mr. President, at the end of the meeting, may I put two quick announcements that we want to vote?
Sure.
Yeah, is it okay? When you be done.
So Wednesday, are we gonna put those items that we want to put into the Halliwell Review Committee resolution changes, or are we just gonna discuss the resolution changes and then those revisions will be done that day? Probably.
Correct. We'd have David, we agree what we're gonna put on there, and then we're gonna have David drop the resolution. And then we'll vote on it and,
And then maybe our meeting might actually have the statement and we won't have any information.
If you're meeting with them Monday and Tuesday, once a week, it's gonna take a while to do. They were testing and credible and before. It's gonna take probably 3 weeks after they do that.
So then I would offer up to the council if, to make sure that we expedite this process. That if the council has any other questions for us, we would certainly be happy to answer them tonight. Not knowing what my availability is to be at the council meetings in the next couple weeks, or speak on our vice chairman's behalf either, or any other member's behalf. I would just offer that up. If there's any other questions that we can address tonight, if there's any other concerns. I know we've had a really good collaborative discussion tonight. It's been great to hear everybody speak. So I just offer that up before we close everything out.
anybody have anything else? You want to close your?
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. Mail. Do you have a second? Multiple seconds from our committee members. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, Halliwell Review Committee is adjourned. Thank you.
And I will also entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Favor?
All right.
Mr. President,
Oh, I'm sorry.
if I may,
Yeah.
we have rapid tests. Please avail yourself